Hi everyone, thanks for joining me for the catch-up of this talk that I held last Monday. If after watching the talk through you've got any questions or I've missed anything out, then feel free to email me at the email address on the end or message me on Instagram. So I'm going to talk through kind of what happened in the run-up to the exhibition, give everybody an update on the crowdfunder. I'm going to talk a little bit about the opening, what happened, who was there, who came after the opening, and then I'm going to see if anybody has any questions. Right, let's talk about the project a little bit. So the project overall that was in Parliament is called Unschooled Heuristic Outcomes. So Unschooled Heuristic Outcomes is part of a project that I started when I was doing my master's degree. I started in 2019 and I finished last year. So the overall project is called Unschooled Heuristic Study, and it's made up of 4 individual spheres. So you've got the Heuristic Home, which is about my family, our 4 children, and our home ed journey for like the 2 years of whilst I was doing the MA in the pandemic, and it finishes with my oldest son going off to university. There's then Heuristic Spaces, which is about 19 families in Cornwall that were long-term home educators, and it was about, or is about, the kind of spectrum of different pedagogical methods that people use when they're home educating. So from total whole life radical unschooling, child-led education, through to much more structured school at home, following the national curriculum, sitting down to a timetable, that kind of thing. And I wanted to cover as much of it as possible. I was doing that when the pandemic hit, and then I started a project called a heuristic interlude, the interlude being the pandemic and the school closures, and it was about 5 families that were not home educating before lockdown, and then whilst they were trialling homeschooling during the lockdown, they decided that they might possibly continue home educating afterwards. And of those 5 families, 3 of them deregistered to home educate and 2 of them sent their children back to school. So going back to the project, the Heuristic Home, which is about our family, as I said, it finished at the end of the MA when my eldest son Bodhi went to university. And this project now, Heuristic Outcomes, that was in Parliament, was a natural progression of that project. So I started looking at my son that had gone to university, his story, his kind of progression of how he had got there. It was basically a way of me looking at the different ways that people move on from home education and what they go on to do afterwards. It coincided specifically with Robert Halfon and the Education Select Committee inquiry, specifically them saying that there was no research into the outcomes of home education. And I kind of thought, well, okay, you say there's no research, so I'll do some. And I didn't really have a plan after that. It was just that they said there wasn't any, so I thought I'd do it and see what else was going to happen after that, kind of thing.